Welcome, welcome to the Empowered Team podcast. I am so excited to be with Desiree Goldey today. She is a real phenom, a real expert. We've got her as the Director of Marketing and Culture at ZRG. And really, it's all about talent and leadership. She gets to recruit. She gets to look for the people who can do the things in the world. And specifically, she's going to tell us more about how people find their purpose, even if they don't have a linear path. How many of us didn't go on that perfect trajectory in order to get to that role or goal or rank or whatever the title is? And the traits that really come with that for leadership. But first, I want to hear more about your role, your experiences. Desiree, welcome. Tell us more about you and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kari. I'm so excited to be here. And this is one of my favorite topics of all time because it really does tell my story and how I got here. Just to back up way back, oh gosh, I turned 50 last year, so we're going way back. But I was in college and kind of thought I knew what I was going to do, had a plan, and like was super focused on a plan and have always been a planner. So really was determined to hit all the goals and the KPIs on that plan. I went into my first role and realized I actually hated that first role, which was in marketing actually. And it wasn't just the company; it was the things that I was tasked to do at the time, and I hated it. And it was I also had a very toxic boss, but that didn't help. But I also didn't like the work. And it's the only job that I've actually picked a box up and walked out on. I picked a box, started shoving all my stuff into it, and like walked out the door. Youth mistake. Youth mistake. Don't anybody do that. But
Fall under.
you're young and stupid. You think that's the move, right? So didn't fall.
It creates a great image, first of all. And secondly, for all those people out there who figure okay, I've got my plan, because a lot of us are planners. I've got my plan, I've got my strategy, now let's execute. And then you've got action takers, doers. You've just described that. And then you get there and it's like, what have I done? Because it's not just a matter of this is a toxic environment. It's also a matter of I've just spent how many years trying to get to here and now I don't like it. So in that moment, you're probably in a state of, did I waste my time? What do I do now? I've just stormed out on something that now they can't even give me a bloody reference.
So, what is the big mistake? But I did go into crisis panic mode. It was a moment of reflection before I did it. And there was an action that caused the final reaction, but it definitely was one of when I walked out the door with the box. I stood on the street for a little bit and I'm like, help, you know, what do you do now, idiot? Like, but it was probably the best move that I've ever made in my entire life. And I went on and actually had no job. A friend of mine owned bars and was like, come please work for me as a bartender till you figure out what you want to do. That started a 20-year career in hospitality, which led into consumer goods, which
So hang on.
so many things. So yeah. Yeah. So it ended up being the path I was supposed to be on, I guess. But it could have been done in a better way. Yeah.
How did you discover? I mean, you're bartending or you're helping out at a bar, but how did your past experience lead you into hospitality? Because, had you not had the work experience, the education, the desire in the beginning, had you not had all that, not like you're going to be bartending and suddenly going into hospitality. It paved the way. So what was the thing at that moment that had you open your eyes and go, wait a second, I'm going to go in this direction in hospitality? Like what was
For me, it was the people aspect. So what part of what I didn't like of the job that I walked down on was sitting in a cube all day. I found the cubicle for my brain and for how I worked super difficult. And I felt constrained by that. And when I started to look at the world of hospitality, you weren't sitting in a cubicle all day. You were yes, maybe you were for bits of your day, but you were out there focusing with people. You were doing a lot of really great things in real life, in real time. And you could also see the efforts pay off, the results of all of your actions, right? And that was super important to me to see the results of what I had actually done and brought to life. But the people aspect is it's how I got through the rest of my career. I loved working with people. I loved talking to people. I loved getting energy from other people. And that for me kind of determined the rest of my career and got me to where I'm at today because, I left, consumer foods at the end and didn't know where I kind of wanted to go. I knew that wasn't still my path. But and there was a determining factor there too. It was very long hours and, kind of this old boy network, which I knew I couldn't get to the next step in. And so I decided that I was going to go into recruiting and talent because people was where I received energy from. And it just seemed like a natural next step. And, I've done many things in talent now for the last 12 years. And it's just been a journey and it's been fun, but it's been an interesting, very nonlinear, all over the place path. People sometimes go to my LinkedIn profile and they're like, what? Because it's kind of all over the place. But if you understand that people is the one thing that kept me doing the jobs I did, then you kind of understand how I got to where I'm at today.
It's so interesting what you've described because for the people listening, we've got people who are in various leadership roles. Maybe it's in community, maybe it's in businesses,
Sure.
maybe it's in sport, but there's an underlying thing that we're always talking about and always coaching, and it happens to be values. And if people are listening to you and listening between the lines to what you're describing, you've just told all of us your values, which end up leading you to your purpose. You talked about how people were so important. So then all of a sudden it's this human connection. You need connection. You need human connection. You talked about how you didn't want to be in a cubicle. It was really constraining for you. You wanted some level of freedom to connect with people. You talked about being in an environment where people were kind of in an old boys club kind of scenario where you knew that there was a glass ceiling of some sort there.
Yeah.
You knew there was a very hard limit and you wanted growth. You wanted more opportunity. So, and these may not be your specific words for values, but I'm sure I'm pointing to this so that people can pull what they might be perceiving as an unusual path for themselves or a unknown for themselves. It's opening up the discovery of who you really are and what you really love in life to be able to do via the things that you are drawn toward or drawn away from. So it's such a cool thing to hear, just how that it's not about not knowing or, it's about discovering yourself, discovering what really matters to you, and then finding what's congruent and aligned with what you really value.
I tell people all the time, it's not that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I absolutely knew I wanted to work with people consistently, and that just happened to be in different industries at different time points in my life. And the ones that I found interesting are the ones that I've jumped to. I've been very lucky to have mentors and people along the way to guide me, and I've talked to so many people before I've jumped into an industry, but I've always made the jump because I thought it was the next logical step for me. I also think there's a piece to this that I talk to candidates about all the time. You know, do you really understand what makes you happy in the workplace? You can say it's a non-toxic environment. You can use these very like buzzwordy things, but what actually makes you feel fulfilled to do a job? And that is, it's not everybody thinks about that. They think, I went to school for this, I'm going to go do that, and this is how it's going to be. And they kind of get stuck and become an unhappy place because they don't really understand what makes them happy in the workplace. For me, it was clear what made me happy and what didn't make me happy. I also happen to be a really decisive person. But at the same time, those things that I didn't want, I knew to look out for, right? I knew what I didn't want. And that was able to craft where I was going as I look at the next step. And that's a hard thing for somebody people to do. They don't do self-reflection in a really, really strong way. And so they end up in jobs or they end up in leadership when maybe they don't even want to be there. And they end up in these positions because they just really don't know themselves through some real deep self-reflection.
You're truly a an expert in your field. So when you come upon that, do you offer advice? Do you offer what do you say? Because I would imagine that you're seeing this type of scenario more and more frequently with younger generations coming into the workforce or potentially going into leadership roles. What is your advice in those situations?
Yeah, especially for leadership, I'm going to say this. Not everybody should be a leader. Not everybody should be a people manager. And when people come to me, when they're trying to assess whether this is the next step, or even when I'm screening you for an interview, I want to find out why you want to be a leader. Is it because this is the logical next step in my resume and it gets me more money? Great. But I need to hear the other piece of that I want to help people grow, that I want to help mentor people. I want to help people get to the next level because without that empathy and understanding and real need to guide people, your leadership is almost ineffective. If you're going into it just to lead profits for a company, that's not going to get you to being an excellent leader that we talk about, that your employees are going to talk. My boss is the best, right? That leadership comes with that empathy and understanding. When I'm talking to people who are just looking for a job or screening them for a role, I really try to dive into some of the emotional points without really diving into it because we have to be careful. But what is guiding you to make this change, or what is helping you determine that this is your next step? Because sometimes people can't answer me. And then I have to dig a little deeper, right? You want to leave your company, and now with this climate that we're in the United States, sometimes it's not your choice, right? But it should be the business your choice, right? Why are you choosing? What wasn't happening for you in that last role that you're looking for in your next? And if you can't answer me about that, I usually push you to dig a little deeper on that because something wasn't happening for you. And people will say growth. There's no opportunity for growth. Well, what growth did you want? And what growth did you need? Were you looking for guidance? Were you looking for a new title? What did that mean to you? And when you start to dig a little deeper, people get almost like taken aback sometimes because they're like, oh, why is she asking me? I don't know the answer. Some people can answer dead on, right? Other people, it really is a struggle for them.
It's interesting because it points back to people understanding themselves.
Yeah.
And I can see why it's such a joy for you because you get to then understand more about people. And you get to be in this unique role of helping them understand more about themselves and really become a bit of a detective to figure out, okay, what are we actually looking at here? Because if you're looking for the talent, you're looking for the leadership, you're recruiting, you now, especially after you've done this for as long as you have, you are fine-tuned at what's going on. So when this is going on, you've already described some of the traits that you look for in a leadership quality. You're looking for them wanting to grow other people, mentor other people. It's not enough just to want that job or want that next level. Most people are going to want the pay grade,
Right.
but it takes a different kind of understanding about oneself to know that even with that pay grade, they could feel miserable or fulfilled. What is it with that pay grade that would feel really amazing based on that person's needs? So what are some red flags that you see when, you've already kind of, to me anyway, I don't know if you see it as a red flag, described one, which is that they just don't know how to answer that. That would be a red flag. Okay, this person needs to start to learn about themselves a little bit more, be a little more reflective, and you're probably offering them that feedback. What are some other red flags that
That's the biggest one. If you can't answer me why you want to lead a group of people, um, I encourage everyone to really think about that. Leading people is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. I tell people all the time, right? It is not the easiest. You have different attitudes, different work styles, different, kind of, all the things, personalities we bring to the table. And you have to be able to manage all that and still get to goal, right? And that is, it's tough. It is definitely not the easiest thing to do. And most of us, most leaders, have not had training to do it. Most of us get sat in the seat and are told, go lead these people. And that is, it's a thing. It's an organizational thing we see across organizations that to me is a fundamentally missing piece. But some other red flags is this, kind of, the answer that, well, it's the next step in my career. That is, to me, is the wrong answer when I get that answer, because that means you haven't really thought it through a lot. But some other things is that they don't have a sense of community or a sense of, you know, what that needs to build a team. When I ask people what does team mean to them, and they're like, it's a group of people who work together. I need more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that work in collaboration? How do you spark collaboration? How do you spark innovation? I mean, those are all things you need to think about when you're sitting in the seat. Then you need people to want to work for you. I asked a great question. This was a long time ago, but well, now a long time ago, probably a few years ago. I asked a CEO, what inspires people to want to work for you? And he's like, well, they get raises every year. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not a response, right? People should want to feel like you believe in them and that you believe in what they're doing and you're doing together to get to a common goal. And they should feel inspired to work with you, right? They should want to come to work for you every day. They shouldn't be like, oh God, that Desiree, she's just, it shouldn't feel like that. And so when you start to look at personalities that are very either inward reflection or, narcissistic in their behaviors, that person in the end is not going to be the greatest leader of people.
So it's interesting because you're pointing to this big problem that's there, which is an organization has someone, they put them into the next level role. Maybe that's manager, maybe that's director, maybe it's CEO, but whatever happens, they typically got there because they were good at their role. And the big misplaced thought that is occurring is that, well, they were the best at this role. That means they'll be great at managing the group, or they'll be great at being in that leadership role. But that can't be further from the truth. They might be the worst person in that role for some of the characteristics that you just described. Sometimes the people who end up being really good at sales, or the people who end up being really good in a certain role, they're there because of very different traits than might be required for leadership traits. It doesn't mean that it's not always that's true all the time. Like sometimes somebody is great in their role, is ready for the next level of their role. I love how you're really filtering this out as to why do you want this role? What is it about leading other people that lights you up? What, there's things there that you're able to really filter out. Now, I've heard some people say that now we're in a space, and when I say now, let's say a year ago, we're in a space where soft skills are more important in leadership roles than the hard skills, than let's say the technical skills, the computer skills, the whatever, but the soft skills of potentially collaborating, understanding with other people, empathy, all kinds of emotional intelligence, if you will. What are your thoughts around that for leadership, and now, or your thoughts around that with the state that the world is in, the U.S. is in, because you are definitely an advocate for diversity, for inclusivity. So where do you find yourself in this day and age with some of the
We could have a whole other show, Kari, about what the state of the United States and might be away brought it. But for the, and I will touch on it a little bit, but from the EQ standpoint and emotional intelligence and the soft skills piece of it, I do believe, and I'm a big believer on empathy and authenticity as a strategy as a leader. But I do believe that you have to have both. I do believe you have to have the knowledge and the skills and the hard skills to be able to do the work that your people are doing, right? To be able to lead them. Plus, on top of it, have that emotional intelligence. I do not believe that you can effectively lead people to feel fulfilled, feel happy about the organization, do all of those things if you are emotionally intelligent yourself. And, I think people have a lot of work to do in that area. It's why I talk about it all the time, because I do believe people struggle with empathy in the workplace because, especially in the United States, we have a very hustle culture that is promoted by get to the end, get profits. That is your goal, and that's your mindset, and that's all you care about. When you leave the emotions out of how you get there, you're making everybody's ride really hard. And if you bring some back in some emotional intelligence into it, some empathy, some understanding, some, one-on-one time, any of these pieces of the puzzle, you are moving yourself forward quicker than if you were just talking about how you didn't hit goal and how we're not making our numbers. When you start talking like that all the time, I think this is why we're in the state of leadership that we're in today, where people are like, oh my God, so many toxic environments. Well, it's created by this profit-driven, let's get to goal-driven type of organizational structure that we have. And it's really tough. It's really tough. On the political stuff, I can't say enough that the emotional and intelligence needed in this country as a whole is huge. I think that, the state of where we're at right now, and by the way, we're so early in, this gets worse, it doesn't get better. And I think if people can stick to, look, I'm going to round back to where we started a little bit, can hold to their values and what is right, and what feels right and what is emotionally right for their teams, we'll be in a better place. When we start, subjecting ourselves to the rhetoric of the media and getting all hyped up and crazy, I think that's the wrong reaction. The right reaction is to stick to what we know is right for our teams, have empathy and understanding as we lead, and really just try to stay the course and kind of shut off the white noise.
Mhm. It really, I think that some of what you're describing, part of it with the leadership, if I were to summarize some of what I'm hearing here, it's less of a do as I say kind of leadership and more of a lead by example leadership. And yet, when you have leaders in place who are leading with examples that you fundamentally don't feel aligned with, then it seems that it's even more important to understand your own values and be able to really stay true to them and tune out all of the noise that's speaking otherwise to be able to get through it, because it does seem like a time of definite disruption and a time that it may feel for many people like it's a step backwards instead of a step forward. And at the same time, you're describing this hustle culture that is racing to the end zone. And that becomes the question, what is that? What does that look like? What does that end point look like? Does it look like massive division between countries in the world, between individuals, between what does that end point actually look like? What are we racing towards exactly? So I really
Don't need to tell me.
well, well, but this is where I think that you really sending that message about, your words were, my values are deeply embedded in everything I do, guiding my decisions and interactions both professionally and personally. and I'm going to say this before one of your mantras at the core, my mantra is do better, people. And I just, when I read that, I was just, yeah, okay, let's, 3 words and a comma, 3 words and a comma. You can even add an exclamation mark at the end. Do better, people. Come on. What are we looking at here? And that is a call, really a call for every individual. And but it encompasses the groups of people as well. It's a call to every individual and groups of people. It's not someone else's responsibility, it's our own. It's not another group's responsibility, it's our group. We can do better. What does that look like? If there's a good, better, best, where am I at right now? Am I at my better? Or am I at my best? Or have I dropped to a level that I consider my worst? What does this look like? And so I really love this commitment to continuous improvement and this mantra that it's an easy reminder. It's like, okay, and I can do better than this. Is this my best? And that actually is the tagline of our company, is that is this the best I can be? It's that we is this my best in order to give my best?
Yeah.
That's our sentence. So it's very aligned with what you've described here, which I absolutely love here. You've pointed to this nonlinear path to getting to a result. You've really spoken about these different traits in leadership and what that looks like in order to have successful leadership that not only is just successful for the company or for the leader, but successful for the entire group, because you're pointing to the fact that when the group is thriving, then the results are way better than when the group is struggling to cross the finish line. And sometimes that is missed when people are looking at only bottom lines and they're not looking for sustainability over the long haul. They're not looking for, what losing through attrition and what does this really look like? So on those notes, you've realized that in your industry that there's some disruptors. Maybe they're political, maybe they're technological. So I had asked a question about in 5 years. So the world, AI, what do you think? What are your concerns, your imagined projections for what is it going to look like? What is your field, the world? What are we looking at in 5 years?
Yeah, I'm going to really focus on the talent industry because I think it's the biggest scare for people in my industry is that AI takes over our jobs. And I don't believe that. I believe there's a combination of both. I think we get better from a technological standpoint. I think we get better from responding and doing better at assessing some things. But recruiting to me will always have a human element. A person wants to talk to another person about where they're going in their life. And I don't know that that can end effectively. I don't want to talk to a robot to see if I'm the right fit for the job at the end of the day. It may be fine to AI to get me there and get me that first interview, but I don't want it to be the end result for making that decision. And I don't believe you remove hiring managers or recruiters out of that mix. AI is on another note from a DEI perspective. It's scary to me. It can it can go both ways. Let me say that. It's either going to put more bias in the situation or it's going to help take it out. And I think that the ones that do this responsibly will help to take out the bias. And I don't know how to do that. I'm definitely not an AI expert, but I definitely see that world evolving in that way. And I think that those, like I said, who are truly responsible to the AI they're creating will figure out a way to remove some of the bias that AI is automatically, as a robot, basically is going to naturally have. And it's a tough thing for me. try to stay up as much as possible on AI because to me it's a little scary. It's a little scary in that realm. Not so much on talent for me, but on the DI side of things, it's a little frightening.
So when people are worried that it's going to take their jobs, what part is AI going to take, do you think? Even though you personally feel that they want to talk to another person about the future of their life. So what part do people that you've encountered think that AI will take that role?
Well, there's already AI that does screens, that does initial phone screens and does initial screens to see if you're qualified. I mean, that's right now. In 5 years, it could evolve to being the recruiter. So it is a little frightening, right? It's already here. It's just not as developed as it will be in 5 years. So yeah, I think they believe it's going to take all of their job. You will no longer need to have the cost of $100,000 person sitting in the seat to do those screens. And the technology is already advancing enough to, kind of screen out candidates that don't qualify. So it gets, for an organization, that's thrilling because they can lose the head count and replace it. For those sitting in the seats as recruiters, it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So and this is why I want to understand more. And you also mentioned the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that right now is at this time of this recording has been cut from, McDonald's and Walmart and various places, whereas other places are going, no, we're not going to do that. And from what I've understood, that one of the problems is that it hasn't been well enough defined within a company so that then they actually understand how it's positively impacting a company. And so then sometimes it ends up being easier to cut. But you're pointing to some of the biases that AI is bringing into recruiting or into filtering for positions that can be a very scary thing as well. And that's, that's already been highlighted. Any thoughts as to how the person staying in the role can make sure that that's not the case?
Yeah. I wish I had a really good answer for you. I think what I've always told talent acquisition people is that you need to be more than an order taker. And what I mean by that is I don't want you shuffling papers and just filling jobs. You need to be a business partner to the business. And that means being strategic in how you do recruiting, strategic in the needs of the hiring manager, looking above and beyond about what the pipeline looks like or budgeting or helping them craft a message about what their team can look like. We're supposed to be subject matter experts at talent. And that also means building teams. And if you're a subject matter expert, you should be lending your voice to guide those hiring managers and the organization through how they build effective teams. And that means being a business partner. It doesn't mean being an order taker. And so an AI may be able to be an order taker, but it can't be a strategic business partner in the way that a human can to another human. And I think if we can develop those skills, which most recruiters have, right? They're just not totally allowed sometimes to do that, or they just feel like it's not their place. But I encourage them as for those that are listening, to do that, to develop those skills, to start pushing back or start having those conversations with hiring managers or your talent leaders to make sure that your voice is heard, because that's how you don't get removed, because you're seen as someone who fuels profits. Again, we go back to profits, right?
But when I like that you said it that way, because ultimately you're still staying true to what you're looking to accomplish in the strategy, in the team, and the connection, in the authentic leadership. But ultimately, if it's a business and it's not a hobby, it's not a nonprofit, profits still do matter. The question is, how are the profits generated, and is it sustainable for the team, and is it sustainable for the business overall? So I love what you described here, being a business partner to the business, being a strategist and a business partner, not an order taker. And but I do think that the likening AI to taking the order is what has been accurate in the past year. And the thing about AI that's so incredible, and this is where what you described is going to be so, so important, is that AI is advancing faster than we can even fathom. My co-author and I just finished a book on the human algorithm, leadership and ethics in AI. And what you've described is bang on when it comes to the biases that are held in AI, not because AI is intrinsically biased, it's because it's learned from humans.
Right.
Humans are biased. It's learning our intelligence, and it is an intelligence. And this is the thing about what's happened is that AI was definitely an order taker. And now, as of June of 2024, AI has passed what's called the Turing and Alan Turing test. And the Turing test is just a test that says, when people do this, when people go and interact with this AI and interact with this human, how often do they identify that it's actually a human or AI? And AI could never pass the test to be identified as human. As of June of 2024, it, for the first time, passed the Turing test, where 54% of the people interacting thought that the AI was human. So it passed, as in 54%, over half of the people. Whereas I think the number was 60% were they would the human, they knew it was a human if they were talking to a human. So 60% of them knew it was a human when they're talking to a human. But when they talked to the AI, 54% of them thought it was human. So we're now getting to a place where people can't distinguish between human and AI. And if they can't distinguish between human and AI, and they want a person to talk to, all of a sudden AI becomes the perfect person to talk to. So the other things that you're describing, to me, this is just my opinion here, but the other things that you're describing, like the being a business partner to the business, looking beyond and for that vision of the business, seeing the pipeline and understanding what's currently there, the future subject matter, the working with the team, those things that you described, putting it all together, if that human is doing that and they have an executive assistant or a executive manager next to them called AI, then that person becomes indispensable because they've just then partnered up with another intelligence that can access way more than they can, but there's still the human there. Then a person like you becomes indispensable. But what you're describing is exactly it, where very quickly the order taker is becoming the orderer.
Yeah.
And very quickly. And so this is where I really hope that the humanness of human connection, of sensory experiences, of reading another face, of feeling what someone else is feeling, is still magnified instead of eliminated.
Yeah.
So that's a huge highlight that I want to make in some of what you've described, because you're right. There are going to be people losing jobs, but the people who will not will be those people who are seeing the bigger picture, including AI with that bigger picture,
Sure.
still advocating for the humanness of the bigger picture. That's my personal.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I mean, I use AI every day now, right? Like, I'm not the ones that completely shy away with it will be lost, right? And the ones that start to embrace it and figure out how it works in their organization and for themselves personally, I think are going to excel at this and figure it all out. I I don't want it to replace all my recruiters, but there is a chance that it definitely reduces that workforce in a big way, or it plants them differently. I had a friend tell me, like, what should I do? Ask me what I should do as my next career. I'm like, I don't know, but I would go take some AI courses and like be an AI, and I don't know what they're called, but like go be an AI person, right? Go do that because that's where the future is going. Right, and those people will make big money and will be, top of their field in, 2 years. Everybody will be looking for one of them. And so, I encourage her to do that. I think it's going to take over in a really big way, especially in recruiting and talent.
It's amazing that, when you're looking at someone going, what should I do? What should I go and be? It's interesting because it still becomes if AI ends up being involved, it still becomes, well, what lights you up? And then AI can then help you boost that because it's one of these amazing things that as an intelligence can magnify the problems of the world or solve the problems in the world or some messy combination of both because of the messy humans that are
behind it.
right. But very, very interesting stuff. So to go into a couple more of the traits that you see are imperative for leaders and a few of the traits that you just don't want to see more leaders with these red flags. So what are some of the real highlight leadership traits and what are some of the red flag ones that you think just no thank you, we don't need more leaders or any leaders like that?
Yeah, I think we've talked about some of them, the empathetic leader having a high emotional IQ. It's for me is super essential. And, I think if you don't think you have it or don't know when you haven't, read some great books. There's some great books out there on it. And kind of level up that emotional intelligence piece of it. I also think there's this very weird thing I always talk about in leadership about being organized and focused, and clear in your delivery of communication. I have a really hard time if you tell me as a leader that they know what they're supposed to do or they know their expectations. People don't know unless you tell them and you communicate it clearly and you include and communicate that in a organized fashion. People who are like, hey, by the way, I need you to get so and so done by the end of the week, but don't give them the details of what you're looking for. And then they come back and you're very upset with the work that they produced. It's because you didn't give them the context. And I find that a lot of leaders have really, really struggle to communicate what their needs are or what the goals are of the organization in a really effective way. I also think there's a piece to this of being, and I don't mean sharing dog stories or whatever, but being a little personal about your own challenges to leaders to your team as leaders to your team is really valuable, right? Showing a little bit of vulnerability never hurt anybody. I'm telling you, you don't have to tell them your woes of the world, but you definitely have to make yourself relatable and a person to them, not just someone who signs their paycheck, which is difficult.
If they're with me, they could tell all the dog stories in the world because I can't get enough dog stories. But yes, I absolutely see where you're coming from because it creates that human element, and this is where people are optimized in their ability to be themselves and perform. It's when they can be human and they know they've got humans next to them who care. And that's a beautiful thing. I love that. I love that. I love that. Is there any there was a best piece of advice that you had. May I share it?
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that you shared. Don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. And you say that it's guided how you live in a personal and professional way to bring your authentic self to those around you and allowed you to succeed. So don't shrink yourself to make others uncomfortable. Is there any other advice that you would give other people or that you might have wished your past self had had? So if you had advice to give your past self, would it be that same advice or would it be something different?
Well, I definitely think don't shrink yourself is huge. I squelched my voice in the beginning of my career and wasn't truly myself. And I only came into success when I started bringing that authentic person. And I know that word's used a lot, but just don't shrink who you are, but also know yourself. And I also believe in shoot your shot. Like listen, just because someone tells you no or tells you it's not possible, please don't take that and run with it. Please look in yourself, find if this is really what you want to do and who you want to be and what you want your career to look like. Go ahead and shape that career. Do the research. Talk to people, build a network or community of people that in that space. It's how I moved through every space that I've been in. So, and I really did just go out on a limb when I got into recruiting and applied for a job and happened to get it. It's just like, you just have to put yourself out there, and it's scary and it's weird sometimes and feels uncomfortable. But I encourage people, if that's what they feel is going to bring them fulfillment at the end of the day, to really go out there and really do it. I didn't also do that during my early career. So those would be the two.
I love that advice. I love that advice. And it's such a time in the world where people really can try so many different things because there's less geographical restrictions. There's so much more available to people, even if it's in their own, creating their own business or trying a job or two or three before they endeavor to do something on their own. There's so much possibility. So I can't say enough about just the advice that you've shared today. Thank you so much. And if people want to reach you, there's a couple of things here. You have an organization that you wanted to highlight, hr4u.org, hr-4u.org, focusing on creating a world where there is a living wage for all. And I think that, clearly with AI, we want to make sure everybody has access to that because it's not to create more haves, have-nots. And if people want to reach you, you're on LinkedIn, on Desiree Goldey. You are on Instagram. You are on Blue Sky. And people can reach you and at Blue Sky at Do Better People. I love it. You got your tagline in there. It's so good. And we are so grateful to have your knowledge, have your wisdom, and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much, Desiree.
Thank you so much for having me, Kari. I appreciate it.